I would like to make an emphasis on two words. One is crisis, and the other is failure or error. It's understandable that there can be no crisis outside mistakes and failures often lead to crises. And my view is that a crisis in a situation when the political elites, the state, the expert community have no opportunity to resolve problems, the crisis is the only strike that can make the authorities start the rethinking process. So long live the crisis, although, as my colleagues have said, we have to pay a huge price for that crisis, but the price would be greater still if this imitation game continued, if this swampy terrain remained in relations between Russia and the EU. We would pay a far greater price for that. And talking of the crisis in our relations and the future of these relations, it is not a matter of some headache between the capitals or a zigzag. It's not a condition caused by the fact that Vladimir Putin has found himself in a different world, as Angela Merkel has said. No, it's about very profound underlying prerequisites for confrontation. We're trying to avoid the word, but there is going to be a confrontation between two systems. A system of the Russian autocracy, which has entered into a new phase of decline when it can no longer rely on domestic economic or administrative resources and has to return to the model of a besieged fortress and the search for an enemy. It's not only a matter of crisis between us, it's a confrontation of values and norms. And naturally, I quite agree with Mikhail Kasyanov to say that at some point trust will emerge between us. Well, if our systems are based on fundamentally different prerequisites, and now if the Russian system is trying to reproduce itself and to prolong its agony through the containment of the West, then I cannot even imagine how we're going to conduct a dialogue between two opposite and hostile systems. So how does Ukraine fit into this context? The deterrence or the containment doctrine, Putin's containment doctrine, took shape before Ukraine, before Ukrainians took to the streets for the Maidan in 2011 and 2012. It was a reaction to the agony of the system, to the Bolotnaya Square and Sakharova Avenue events. The hammer was already made ready in the Kremlin, and then when it was ready to strike, now they found Ukraine. If not Ukraine, that would have been Moldova or Narva, about which Andrei Piankovsky is warning. So when Ukraine began a demonstration of the crisis and confrontation, so one story has ended in our relations, and one historical chapter is over, and another chapter is beginning in the history of Russia and in the history of Europe, and no one is ready for that. We don't even have the political language to explain our current position. We still use words like partnership, but they don't mean anything at all. It's an illusion. We're trying to avoid the word containment. It's a very unpleasant word, like a razor. But sanctions, the sanctions are indeed a measure of containment. we are doing something, but we don't have the word for it. But as a result, we'll have to revise many things, and the sooner the better. Secondly, about failures and delusions. To some extent, I represent here the expert, not political community. So this expert community of specialists in international law, both in the West and in Russia, it's a field of complete failures. It's constant chronicle fiasco, which is burning in flames, the fiasco of the political and analytical thought of this community, both in the West and in Russia. In 1991, Sovietologists buried themselves who had continued to assert that the Soviet Union would live long. In the 90s, the so-called transitologists buried themselves, who were saying that Yeltsin was a liberal reformer. Not recently, the resetters ended their lives, those who believed on Medvedev's liberalism, and together with the West, like Obama or Brussels, to do some resetting of relations. And they were so busy resetting them that they failed to see how Moscow had prepared a sledgehammer. Of course, they were shocked. No one can ever foresee a revolution. You cannot predict an abscess, but they could well see what the doctrine of Russia's foreign policy concept would lead to. And Putin and Lavrov were quite frank, talking to Europeans and Americans. We don't need you. Your resetting is no good for us. But the experts did not believe that. So in conclusion, I would like to say that we cannot go out of this deadlock unless we revise our axioms, our beliefs and stereotypes radically. And don't expect Vladimir Putin to help us in this rethinking. Yes, he is helping the Ukrainians to understand what a nation state is, and he is helping the Europeans to understand that they have been mistaken for 23 years. And the year 1991 was the downfall of the state and the rebirth of the system out of that downfall. And we need to rethink the concept of war, because today's war in Ukraine does not fit into any earlier concepts, and future forms of war will not be the kind of war that the OSCE or UN Security Council are familiar with. We need to revise our strategic interests and strategies that do not coincide with those of Europe. And my colleague Sven Olof said that the system of international relations management, like the Security Council and the OSCE, is such that people don't follow the rules. But that means we need to think up a new mechanism that would make the aggressors to follow the rules, and I'm not sure that the OSCE can play this peacekeeping role in the southeast of Ukraine. In short, I call on revision, and Konstantin will help us in that.
Thank you very much. I have a short question, and I hope for a brief answer. Why is a dialogue not possible? They held the dialogue with the Soviet Union, and these were two different systems, and the military opposition was even tougher. I suppose that many in Brussels should think like that. I just raised the question of how a dialogue could be sustained between two hostile parties in this in this new historical situation. In this way, we don't even know how to contain Russia. Nicolas spoke about containment. How should that be done when in the Western society there's a very powerful pro-Russian lobby represented significantly in the European Parliament too? Previously, there was no such lobby in the West, and it was easier to contain the Soviet Union. Now there's such a lobby, and that's a different situation. A dialogue could be developed, but on the basis of the values and principles that the West believes in. But today it's all different. Many recollect the München days and propose the New Deal concept. The deal they propose is let's exchange Ukraine for the Middle East, or this some settlement in the Middle East, and some trade-off is being offered. I think that a possibility of a normal dialogue depends on Putin's abilities to stick to the principles and the West's ability to use its own values.